If you had the opportunity to ask David Goggins a question, what would you ask? What's up? I'm Rob Cressy, and welcome to Best Year Ever, a podcast designed to inspire growth and impact so you can create your best year ever. In this past weekend at Ryan Stewman's Million Dollar Mastermind, I got the opportunity to ask David Goggins a question. And for those watching the video, I'm throwing the image up right here. And then afterwards, I also got the opportunity to shake his hand and meet him. So what I want to do is share my experience of the question that I asked David Goggins, plus my mindset and strategy for how I created the question and took advantage of the opportunity, and what you can learn from this to capitalize on any opportunity that you have to meet David Goggins or anyone you aspire to speak with. So let's go back to the top. What question would you ask David Goggins if you got the opportunity to do so? So for me at Million Dollar Mastermind, they said, hey, we've got a David Goggins Q&A. So immediately I'm like, all right, there's an opportunity where I might get a chance to ask David Goggins a question. So a few hours before, I started to think about this, and I'm formulating in my head. I'm like, all right, what do I want to ask him? I am yet to meet David Goggins in my life. Don't know when that'll happen again. I have read his book. I have also read Jesse Itzler's book, Living with a Seal. I've listened to podcasts of David Goggins. I follow him on Instagram. I'm about that disciplined life. So boom, I would love to talk to David Goggins. Let's make this count. And what I started with was, all right, what's going on in my life? What do I actually want to know from David Goggins so that I can take action on this? Because a lot of people get super nervous and they ask something that may be surface level. I wanted to know something that is applicable to my life right this day that I'm working on. So the question that I came up with, and I'm going to throw this image up again, I said, David, one of the things that I'm working on right now in my life is empathy. I want to have more empathy. And I'm curious to hear from you the difference or how you see empathy versus being candid and having no excuses. Because David Goggins, as we all know, he is someone who is about that no excuses lifestyle. So when you're someone like him who doesn't really believe in excuses, well, where does empathy live? Because empathy is really our ability to sympathize with someone in their situation, which is an interesting sort of polarity as it relates to no excuses. And that's what I'm working on in my life. So boom, I want to hear from him, the guy who has no excuses. What do you think about empathy? And I'm paraphrasing, and you know what he said? He goes, Rob, I have no empathy. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but hearing him say that, I was like, cool. And then he elaborated on essentially saying, listen, your goal as a leader should be toughen up the skin of those that you lead. And that very much resonated with me because one of my core values is candor. I'm someone who I'm going to be very candid in the way that I speak to you. But I also want you to be very candid in the way that you speak to me. Because if there is something that you see about me that I am doing or not doing, I want you to tell me, even if it's a difficult conversation, because the real value out there is when I don't see something and I've got a blind spot. I don't want the rest of the world tiptoeing around me being like, yeah, Rob, we see this thing that's going wrong with you or your business, but no one wants to tell me. Me as a coach, a lot of the value that I bring to the table is my ability to be candid. I'm going to tell you how it is, how I see it, because most people don't have somebody around them willing to tell them exactly how it is. And it doesn't mean that we're doing so from a harsh or negative place. It is more in the name of improvement. And I first learned this when I was building out Bacon Sports and I was the editor-in-chief, and we're publishing thousands of articles, videos, and podcasts. And I had a team of writers, and I was like, listen, guys, in the name of improvement, I'm going to be very candid with the way that I see things. And this is all to get the best out of you. And for me, that's essentially what I took from David Goggins' answer was, hey, get more out of your team by being candid with them. And I look at the people that I work with on the coaching side of things, and they appreciate my candor. David also said, listen, there's also a time and a place for when you are going to use empathy, because all relationships are not candid 101. And I think certainly anyone who is in any sort of relationship with a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and maybe even sometimes with our children, that this is where we may exercise our empathy a little bit more. And I know this is one area where I'm really working on it, because as a coach and as a high performer, my default is, ooh, I see something, I want to fix it. Here's the steps. Go ahead and implement this right now. But that doesn't always work the best with close family relationships around you. Sometimes people just want to be heard, and it's my job to listen as a leader or a husband. So that's really what I took from what I learned from David Goggins. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into this. So into the sort of the behind the scenes process in my mind that nobody else saw. So I shared with you sort of how I formulated my question. I wanted something that I'm working on here, but there's a second part to this. And for me, I've learned this. Anytime you get the opportunity to ask a question in front of a large group of people, so there were probably several hundred people at this Q&A for David Goggins that at the Million Dollar Mastermind. So there's an audience, there's eyeballs on you. And a lot of people will go in and they will ask a very personal question, which is good. I did that. But oftentimes it is only related to what's going on in your world. And you know what? That's fine. If you get the answer that you're looking for, by all means, boom, ask David Goggins, because he can help you. However, as a leader, I know there are levels to this. And I can create a question that not only answers what's going on in my world, but is relevant to every single person who is in that audience right there. And looking at the question that I asked, I would like to think that it was one of the most unique, if not the most unique, because empathy is an emotion or a skill that we all have the ability to acquire or work on or do something with. So for me, this is like an inch in our mindset when we're talking about empathy or discipline or whatever it is. Like, boom, this specific thing. So everybody in that audience could benefit from learning about empathy, as opposed to if I got a little bit more specific about something going on in my business or in a relationship that maybe only it was relevant to me or someone else. So the tip for you is, in opportunities in which you're in a group setting and you can ask a question, think about if there's something that you can ask that can benefit everyone. And another example for this, which is where I really learned this, is a few years ago when I was at the Arte Syndicate Live in St. Louis, and they had a Q&A, and I got the opportunity to ask Ed Milet and Andy Frisella a question, and it was a very similar experience where, boom, 3 days of the best speakers, the best learning, leveling up, mindset, success, money, relationships, everything. And they're like, boom, time for Q&A. So I get up and I ask a question, and the question that I asked them was, we had just learned for 3 days. We're on fire for everything. We're about this life. Boom, I'm ready to do this. But this is a fire hose of information. How do you guys recommend we take action on everything that we learned? Because quite frankly, this can feel a little bit overwhelming. And what Ed Milet answered back to me, he was like, Rob, what I want you to do is to summarize your best action items from the entire experience, rank them, and then start at the top. Number one, do this. Once you implement it, go to the next. And by asking that question, I knew what was on the mind of the majority of the people at that event. If you were like me, you were on fire for your life and you wanted to implement this stuff. At the same time, I know many of us relate to going to these events and feeling on fire, and then the subsequent week comes and you're like, I feel sort of stagnated because of how much there is for me to do now. Boom, that question answered it. So the next thing that I want to dive into is opportunity. So with Million Dollar Mastermind and the David Goggins Q&A, they said there is an opportunity to ask David a question. So when the time came and they're like, all right, guys, time to line up. If you want to ask David Goggins a question, go right over here. And as good fortune would have it, they put the microphone one row in directly to the right of where I was standing. So close to me that I was the second person in line. And boom, that was such a blessing. I got to give a shout out to my friend Stephanie, who was sitting in that section. And when I saw her, she's like, oh, hey, Rob, come on down here. So I sat directly behind Stephanie. So major shout out to her for hooking up the seats, which ended up being the best seat possible. And the next tip for you is whenever you get a chance to have a conversation with someone who inspires you or you want to do things like, or someone who may even make you nervous, take that opportunity, stand up and raise your hand immediately, even if you do not know what you are going to say. But remember, I've been down this path before. So step one, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say in case I get the opportunity to do that, so that I don't roll up to that microphone and get all nervous and fumble on myself. Nah, I'm a professional. I'm a tactician. So you know what? When I rolled up to that microphone, I was prepared. And there's actually another level to this. One of my declarations that I speak out loud every single day, and I learned this from Jesse Itzler. I am the confidence that I belong. So was I nervous when I stood up and I walked to that microphone? Yes. The second the lights were on me and they're like, Rob, it's your opportunity. Boom. Nerves went away. I was in execution mode because that's David Goggins. Yes. But he's also just another person. And I know what I want to create. Boom. I'm going to create an amazing question. I want to learn about empathy and how I can be better at it. And those nerves went away immediately. And speaking of, there's one thing that I got to add here that I learned from David Goggins outside of my question, which is relevant. One of the things that he said that I loved, which may be the best thing I learned the entire 3 days at Million Dollar Mastermind, the more fear you have, the more you waste your life. I'll say that again. The more fear you have, the more you waste your life. Oh, baby, that resonated with me so much. So you get the opportunity to ask a question. And once again, going back to my Arte Syndicate Live example, when I stood up for that, I didn't have a question that was ready. And I was nervous. And in the same instance, it just so happens that they put the microphone right next to my row in that case. And I was also the second person to ask a question. So that's when I really learned. They say, who's going to ask a question? You just raise your hand reflexively and you say, I better figure this out really quickly. Or as you level up, you say, I'm already prepared for this. Next tip for you, and this is next level from a personal branding standpoint. And when it came time for me to speak, I rolled up and I was like, hi, David, my name is Rob Cressy. And it is very important that I said my full name because I wanted, number one, David to hear my name and know my name because there's a chance I'm going to see him and meet me again later on down the road. So boom, this is our first introduction of our first conversation. I'm Rob Cressy. He's David Goggins. Number two, I wanted everyone who was there at the event to also hear my name because I'm around some of the most talented and wise and giving entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners in the world. So boom, I want them to hear Rob Cressy so that when they see my content or they enjoy my question, boom, they can come up to me afterwards or we can connect at a later date. Or maybe years down the road, they say, oh, that was you who asked David Goggins the question at MDM, which I got later on down the road. So as a tip, don't just say, my name is Rob. Say, this is Rob Cressy. Boom. That way, everyone sees it or hears it. So for me, that's really my David Goggins experience. It was absolutely fantastic. And what I loved about it is we all see David Goggins as this robot Terminator, which he totally is, but he was also very human. And one of the things early on that I loved, I have a picture of David Goggins smiling. And I'm not sure if he's smiling in the picture of he and I right here, sort of smiling, but it made me relate to him more. I'm like, wait a second. David Goggins smiles. He's not just this guy we see on Instagram. And it was such a cool experience to be around someone of that level and hear his mindset, because he was very candid, but he came so from a place of improvement and no BS. And I really appreciated that. So I want to hear from you. What question would you ask David Goggins if you got the opportunity? You can hit me up on all social media platforms at Rob Cressy, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. You can also go to robcressy.com if you're someone who's about this life and you want to launch a podcast or you want to level up your mindset. I would love to have a conversation with you. You can email me, rob@robcressy.com. I love connecting with everyone. This is something that I'm a natural relationship builder, and I'm a giver, and I want to make the world a better place. So I would love to hear from you. Sending tons of good vibes your way. I hope you have yourself an amazing rest of the day.